Hello everybody, your GP in Scrubs is back. Last week I posted a diagram on Facebook showing the coronavirus death rate and case rate, the two curves one on each other. And I received a question asking what we shall do then. I thought I would just respond in another Facebook post, but I had to realize that I couldn't fit the content into a single post. So instead I decided to do another video following on after the April one, when I summarized my initial experience in treating coronavirus patients as a GP. Now this is the second wave coming, so I thought it's a good time to summarize our experience. My first question was whether we learned from the first wave or we still keep doing the same things just because we have no better idea. This was the curve here, the black showing the death rate, the blue showing the case rate. Obviously they are not on the same scale, but this is the best way to show them together because you can appreciate their connection to each other. In the area marked by the red circle, this is where we are now, the second wave to say so. The blue is the number of the cases and the black is the number of the death. And my conclusion in the Facebook post was that the blue curve shows the rate of the panic and the black curve shows the rate of the problem, so we should act accordingly. And then I received the question what we shall do. I took it seriously and started thinking. First I wanted to find out, I was actually desperate to find out whether the lockdown worked. So I took a few examples and it came very naturally to compare the UK to Sweden, as the two countries had a very different approach to the pandemic. Whilst in Sweden there was not much of a lockdown, there were some measures of basic social distancing, schools remained open, only higher education closed. And in England, as opposed to Sweden, it was a very strict lockdown. You were not allowed to leave your house unless for buying food and essential or 1 hour for exercise. All non-essential shops, pubs, bars, restaurants and workplaces closed. All schools closed. And then later masks became compulsory. Let's see the timeline. First of all, the lockdown started in March. 23rd of March. You see that 2 weeks later the case numbers were still rising, but 4 weeks later it was the peak, and then one could argue that it was the lockdown that made the difference and turned the tide, and then after that the numbers started to come down. However, if you go back to compare the two curves, the Swedish and the British, you see that without lockdown the numbers started to drop naturally, because this is the nature of the virus spreading in this climate. On the other hand, after the lockdown started to ease, one would expect a spike that shows that after these measures were lifted, the virus started to spread quicker. Instead, what we see when lockdown eased and the newspapers were full with horror stories of people going onto crowded beaches, nothing really happened here. We see 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, the curve started to come down and taper nicely, just as the Swedish one. Same when the restaurants opened, Nothing happened 2 weeks or 4 weeks later. Eat Out to Help Out scheme, massive increase in social interactions. The curve didn't even change a slight. Schools. Primary schools reopened. All the children went back without any masks. They were mixing and interacting with their peers. No rise. School holidays, again, nothing happened. This was the time when actually the masks became compulsory. And then as you remember, the blue curve, it started to rise the cases in September. Why? Because children went back to school. But you remember, they went back to school for 6 weeks in July and then nothing happened. What is the difference? Because it's September now, the weather changes, all children get snotty, they start coughing and they have a temperature every September. And now, because cough and temperature are hallmarks for the coronavirus, they all had to get tested. And the testing capacity went up, and as we tested more and more, the case numbers just started to rise rapidly. Thankfully, the death rate is not following it. I wanted to bring up another example comparing Peru to Brazil. As you see, the curves look very different to the European ones, simply because the climate is different there. But in Peru there was a very strict military type lockdown, whilst in Brazil there was no lockdown at all. You see, the two curves are very similar, meaning that the lockdown didn't make a difference. If anything, as you see, Peru had a higher death toll per million compared to Brazil. Obviously, it is very multifactorial. I can't put it down to the lockdown on its own. But the shape of the curve, both in the case of Peru and Brazil or Sweden and UK, were very, very similar. For me, it means very clearly that lockdown doesn't make a difference. In March, we didn't have much of a knowledge. It was all theory. We thought that if we reduced the number of social interactions, if people didn't go out, if they stayed at home, it would slow down the virus. But what we saw, it didn't work. Now we are in October, we have the experience of the whole year, we know how this virus behaves, so we should stop doing the measures that were proven to be ineffective. If anything, they are harmful. Why don't we do that simply? Because it would lead to recognition that we are practically helpless, not in control at all, and whatever we try to do, all the sacrifices were ineffective, unnecessary, and harmful. These consequences were just unbearable. The stress level would go up so much that a Western person, a European person, couldn't handle that. We are absolutely used to be in control and rule our lives. Same for the government. Any economic regression would be better than admitting that they have no power at all. If you remember at the beginning, in the first week of the pandemic, Boris really tried to be realistic. His message was, here is the pandemic, it is a very new virus and we will have a lot of loss, but at the end we will develop herd immunity and we will move on. This message was just unacceptable to the population. It upset people so much that after a week Boris had to change his rhetoric, because he's a politician, he has to go by the wave if he wants to stay in position. So this is what he did. He went by the demand that something needs to be done. We want measures that keep us safe, or at least give us the sense of safety. What shall we do then? My suggestion, first of all, what we shall not do. No more lockdown, thank you. And it's not because I'm a cruel person and I don't care about the elderly and I vote for economic stability over the life of elderly people. It is not. You can see that no people could be saved by general lockdowns. But why not? Why doesn't it work? And it worked in China and it worked in the Far East. Why doesn't it work, for example, in Europe or in South America? South America, in Peru, it doesn't work because people are poor. They don't have refrigerators. They have to go out to crowded markets every day or every other day to buy fresh food, and social distancing is practically impossible on those markets. In Europe, we do have fridge freezers, but I just checked how many people were considered as key workers. 33%. It meant that every third worker were a key worker, and then they all went to work as normal. It seems that it was way enough for the virus to keep spreading as normal. So I'm not sure what the critical number is, how many people should stay at home for the virus to stop. But this 1/3 is clearly not enough. This type of soft lockdown, however strict we felt it was, just inefficient. If it's inefficient, we shouldn't pursue with that. And in China, you remember that their approach was a complete lockdown of an area like Wuhan. No soul in, no soul out. It would be impossible in Europe or in any European countries. This is why these different lockdowns and adapted lockdowns either work or not work. So what shall we do then? I would say on a population basis, give people the choice. The society is so much divided. Some people deny the COVID. Other people are so worried that they still reluctant to leave their homes after 6 or 8 months. If someone feels vulnerable, they should have the choice to shield or self-isolate if they want to. But other people who feel safe, they should have the choice to get on with their lives and go for party if this is what they want. My other recommendation would be to stop testing. As we saw, the number of the cases were rising after we started mass testing. And my suggestion would be to test only those people who are ill and need to go to hospital. So the test result would guide the doctors on the treatment. On a personal basis, I can't say anything different from what I did back in April, saying that look after yourself and support your immune system by regular sport activities, maintaining a healthy weight, having a healthy diet. So practically run for your life, keep fit. Thank you for watching. Bye.